Tombstone. Such a cold, quiet night tonight. The moon is so pale among the trees and grass. No breeze, but a chill in the air. I sit here, perched on the tombstone, like some demonic creature. I've been sitting here every night for the past 50 years. So much time has gone by. Tonight is the anniversary. 50 years. Some say time goes by fast, yet seems so long when thinking hard about it. It seems like yesterday, but seems so long ago. Let me tell you about the night I became a vampire. My fiancée Laura and I had been dating for 6 years. We were so much in love. We had had so much fun being with each other, and we were unbreakable. We were planning our wedding. We had a date set and couldn't wait for it to come. We were so excited. One evening we got into a big argument. It was the first real fight we ever really had. We were both scared about the wedding and maybe our commitment to each other. I couldn't figure out why. All of a sudden, there was such doubt from her. She accused me of cheating on her. I told her I have not cheated on her. We both tried to calm down, but something about this argument was strange, out of control. We told each other that we do love each other, that we have a future together. Yet, she yelled at me to get out. She wanted to be alone. So I left. As I walked out, I turned to look at her, and she was crying on the couch. I continued to leave and shut the door. I walked the streets for a little bit and decided to head over to the local bar. I entered, walked up to the bar, and I ordered a beer. I sat at the far table in the corner. I wanted to stay away from the crowd. It was a Saturday night, so the place was jumping. A lot of smoke and a lot of laughing and talking among the patrons. A good atmosphere to kind of relax in. I started to have doubts now about the relationship and marriage plans. I never felt that negative about this at all. I know deep down we love each other, but my God, I feel really upset. Starting to get mad. How can she think that I cheated on her? I asked myself. This uncontrollable rage started to come over me. Not sure why, but damn. Maybe it's for the best. Maybe leaving tonight to get cooler heads will help. I do love her. I look over and notice this beautiful, I mean completely gorgeous redhead. She was sitting alone at the corner booth. She has such a beautiful, sexy face. Nice red lips. She sat on the corner of the booth to show off herself. She has the longest legs and wearing a tight black short dress. My God, she is stunning. She looked over at me. Her eyes looked as though they were diamonds. Staring at me, she smiled and waved me over. I couldn't believe she was this forward. I thought for a second. I said to hell with it and walked over to her table, thinking to myself that if Laura thinks I cheated on her, well, maybe I will make it so. I can't think that way. I love her. I really do. But something was drawing me to this woman. I went with a pull. She stood up and shook my hand. Her hand felt so good in mine, very smooth, soft. She leaned over and gave me a hug, too. I was shocked she did that. She smelled so wonderful, like some beautiful field of roses. I fell for her that moment. We sat and talked. I told her about what happened between my fiancé and me. She said that young love can be that way. She was very flirty. She even took off her shoe and started to rub her foot up and down my leg. I was starting to get turned on. She told me she was watching me and really liked me. She asked me if I would like to go for a walk, for some fresh air, to get out of this bar for a while. I told her yes, and we got up and left. She put her arm around my waist, and we walked side by side. She leaned her head on my shoulder. She laughed at things I said. I was being playful. She's fantastic. I am really attracted to her. I asked her if she was a witch, because I told her she put a spell on me. She laughed and said, "Not quite." We got to an intersection of the buildings in an alleyway. She slid herself in front of me and pulled me into the alley. She started to kiss me deeply, passionately. I really was getting into her. I may even start having feelings for her. I stopped. I pulled away as I thought of Laura. I told her I can't. She said too late, and her eyes got deep red, and her face changed to something horrific and evil. She grabbed a hold of me and pulled me in. Her sharp teeth punctured my neck. She was draining the life out of me. As she stopped and looked down at my body, I was just laying there in the dirty alley floor. She asked me if I wanted to live. I said yes, but not knowing what she meant. At that moment, I saw nothing but darkness. I woke in a flash and was in the cemetery, laying in the grass. She was there standing over me. She told me I am now a vampire. I will be forever living this way. I will be haunting the night for eternity, but I will be alone forever. She explained that it was her that put thoughts into Laura's head that I was cheating. This vampire bitch told me she wanted me, as she has seen me many nights during my life. She wanted me for this one night. She smiled and left in a flash. I'm not sure where she went, but I was helpless for a while. I got my strength and stood up. Everything was different. Sight, smells, sounds, all different, amplified. I thought of Laura. I had to see her. I went to her home, looked at her through the window. I could not go up to her just yet. I need to know what I can do to fix what has happened to me and her. I waited 3 nights and decided to visit her. I walked to her door and knocked. She answered and was shocked to see me. She asked me where I have been, and she was looking for me everywhere. She said she was sorry for accusing me of cheating. After that night, she no longer had that feeling. I now knew why she had that feeling. I told her about being a vampire now. I told her that this will be the last time I see her. She cried out loud, "No!" She said she needs me. She loves me. She will do anything to be with me. I thought for a second and asked her if she would join me as a vampire, if she would be with me for an eternity. How romantic that will be for us. What a great story our life will be. She said yes, and I went down to bite her neck. So I sit here now, on the tombstone, in deep thought of sadness, as I do every night, blood tears running down my cheek, alone. I was way into thinking that we would be together for eternity as vampires, lovers. I was only turned 3 nights prior to that day, and instead of turning her into a vampire, she died in my arms. I didn't know how to turn her. So I sit on her tombstone all these years. I promised to be with her for eternity. It's my fate, my punishment. I sit alone on her tombstone with thoughts of her and that night. The Kill, unknown author. He dragged me to the cemetery while I was tied up in ropes. I stopped crying and begging for help about an hour ago. I felt tired and hopeless. If this is the end, then this is it. If this is how it really goes, then let it be. I don't care anymore. We stopped before this hole big enough for a person. I saw a dirty shovel beside it, which probably meant he dug it up for me. My very own grave. He pulled my hair backwards and stared at me one last time with his sad yet enraged eyes. I closed my eyes as he pushed me down the hole. I looked up and saw his face once more. Memories flashed inside my head. How happy we were. How in love we were. As dirt came falling down on me, I saw the moon was full. I smiled for the last line of hope. Its light shone down on me as my eyes turned red. With all my power, I jumped outside the hole while he was too scared to move, dropping his shovel. I started squirming around and howled as loud as I could. I looked straight into his eyes, smiled with my razor-sharp teeth, and said, "Forgot to check the calendar, didn't you?" The Vegas Vampire. I've spent my entire life living under the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip, the real city that never sleeps. Eventually, as I became older, I was destined to work on the Strip like the other members of my family. By 21, I was dealing 21, or blackjack, for you simple bastards. I quickly became good at what I did, the best in the building as a matter of fact. The cooler behind the felt, they called me. Taking money was my business, and business was good. Sadly, I became a little too cocky one early morning and ran afoul of a gentleman from New Orleans. I took his money and let him know I took his money. I clocked out a few hours later, not thinking twice about what I had done earlier. I made it out to my car in the parking garage, and as I stuck the key into the door, I heard from the shadows to the left of me a voice. All he said was, "Hello there." I quickly turned, but as I did, he was on me, knocking me to the asphalt. He turned my neck to the side and bit into me, draining me of my blood, then leaving me to die. I woke up hours later in the hospital. I made a statement to the police, but didn't see who attacked me, so it was useless. I was treated for my wounds and later released. The man who attacked me that morning placed a curse upon my soul. I became insatiated with a thirst for blood, a ravenous hunger that would not dissipate. It wasn't like the movies. I wasn't like the newly turned, not wanting to hurt another person and just feasting on animals. I'm sorry, but F that. I attacked the first person I came across, a lovely homeless man I found resting in an alleyway. The first few kills were a little rough. I'm not a killer after all, but as the years have gone by, I've honed my craft and have become an excellent killing machine. Las Vegas truly is an excellent feeding ground. There's people out and about all through the night. Plenty of shadowy places to feed, and plenty of different kinds of people from all walks of life to feast upon. The locals are fine, but the tourists taste delicious. And oh, how easy they are to feed on. Bunch of drunk, horny bastards. Yes, while I will live forever, this life can be lonely, and is becoming lonelier by the day. Like I said, I'm cursed. This isn't a damn movie. It isn't beautiful, and it's not romantic when I'm feeding on you. And trust me, I will eat your ass. So be warned when you vacation in Las Vegas, for you might run into me, the Vegas vampire. Sleepwalking. Author unknown. I started sleepwalking when I was 12. Every few nights I'd wake up in another part of the house, or even in the garden, and couldn't remember how I got there. It got worse over time. Once, I woke up in the middle of the street, 3 miles from home. I was covered in cuts and bruises, but I didn't remember anything, as usual. My mom said I must have been hit by a car while I was asleep. She was so scared. So was my dad. So was I. They decided to tie me to my bed at night. My dad even bought a lock for my bedroom door that only opened from the outside. It was uncomfortable and took a while to get used to, but it was worth it because it worked. For the first time in weeks, I was waking up in my own bed, safe and sound, every day. But last night, they must not have tied me properly, because I woke up in my parents' bedroom. I'd always thought they were restraining me for my safety. I never even considered that it might have been for theirs. Vampire Myths by LoreCriticizer. So you're a vampire? That's right. The stranger took a shaky sip of his cup, which was filled with heated blood. Thanks again for letting me in. No worries. You looked really hurt. Although, if you're a vampire, how did you just fall into my house when I opened the door? Like, don't I have to verbally tell you to come in? There are many myths. His pale complexion was rapidly gaining color, and some of the scratches on his face were closing as he took more sips of his blood. We don't need to ask to enter houses. It's just that for a period, all vampires were taught to be very polite, to try to make humans less scared of us. Oh, well, it succeeded, I guess. You don't seem very scary. Thanks. More, please. He held out his cup, and I refilled it from my teapot, which held blood packets, which he had asked me to reheat. But you guys can turn into animals, right? Animals? He barked out a laugh. Oh yeah, totally forgot about that. We mind control animals to act as distractions. We can't actually transform into them. Humans just aren't good at noticing that the vampire dove into a bush rather than turning into a rat. We can fly, though. He hovered a foot off the sofa to prove his point, then collapsed back on with a wheeze, clutching at his stomach wounds, which even after half a liter of blood had yet to heal, merely scab. So, what did this to you? I thought you guys could heal from anything that wasn't from a wooden stake. Again, another myth. We can die from taking too much damage, Otherwise, we wouldn't have lost so many in World War II. He coughed. And that wooden stake thing is complete BS. Medieval kings just couldn't admit that they had no way of beating us mano a mano, and said that so their armies would look less bad as we were slaughtering them. Wait, so it's all myths? Like everything we know is wrong? No, there are beings that do need to be invited into houses. It's just that humans barely ever encounter them, so you guys don't know what they are. Oh, like what? Turning around, I dropped the teapot. Some thing was standing at my doorway. It was huge, 7 feet tall at least. Fangs ripped out the sides of its mouth, and it twitched maniacally, somewhat akin to a seizure victim. Its arms were bone thin, but one look and I knew that it was strong enough to tear my house down to its roots, if it wanted to. Its deep, soulless eyes were locked right on the man on my couch. It was clear, from their intelligence, from their hate, that it wanted nothing more than to kill. That would be our predators. Children of the Night by the Prowler. When the autumn moon is high, and the air is crisp, and the breeze that stirs up across the darkened sky chills the very blood that courses throughout my being, is the time I hear it calling me. It transforms my senses, my thoughts and actions. I am completely consumed by its call. Its temptation takes a locking hold of my body and completely takes control. I am no longer myself, for I am a slave to its demands. I fall to my knees as it rages through my body, staring up at the full autumn moon. Pain courses through each vein like unimaginable torture. My muscles contract and widen. I can feel my skin rip apart as the light from the moon pierces the pupils of my eyes, turning my irises from a light hazel to a darkened red. My body begins to violently contort as my muscles and bones elongate and become larger and wider. I moan out, "Why, God?" as I agonize in pain from the violent change overtaking my body, and as I feel my skin being replaced with coarse patches of fur, I hear others like me calling out. Their howls sharply cutting through the hollow winds that move through the deadened branches of the trees. I slowly become entranced in the high-pitched, melancholic tones echoing through the midnight ether, when suddenly I notice I'm without a voice. My transformation is complete. I sound like the others, the children of the night. What sweet music we make. Stuck in traffic. Author unknown. I jerked awake as the deafening sound of the closing door resonated in my ears. It took me a few seconds to understand where I was. I looked up through the window to have a peek of the platform where the train had come to a stop. My head was buzzing as I struggled to read the name of the station displayed on a blue board. Despite the lights in the station, it was getting dark. A handful of people were sitting in my car, late workers in gray suits, students with tired looks, and a couple of hobos. My heart started racing as the realization sank in. I was far from home. A chill of terror shook me. How could I have been so stupid? Sure, I had been agitated these last few days, as usual, but falling asleep in the train, tonight, it was a nightmare scenario. I tried to gather my thoughts. My eyes fell on the red handle sticking out above the car door. If I pulled it, I knew the train would come to a stop. Then what? I wasn't sure the doors would open. Sure, I could try to break a window, but I still couldn't make it home in time. It would be in the streets. No way. I quickly counted the passengers of the car. There were 8. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on my breathing, even if I knew it was pointless. I now was bent over with my head between my knees and my hands over my ears. From the corner of my eyes, I could see one of the young passengers giving me a worried look. I had to make a choice. My arched back was soaking with sweat, and I could feel saliva drip between my clenched teeth. The teenager shyly approached me and asked if I was all right. I opened my mouth, but the only sound coming out was a distorted and painful scream, as my vocal cords were tearing apart. The young man recoiled, and I could hear the other passengers starting to whisper. The whispers turned to terrified screams when my back started cracking and expanding. My nails were falling, only to be replaced by razor-like claws. As the train emerged from a tunnel, a burning sensation pierced through my chest. The light of the moon, round and high in the sky, was pouring from the window. Tufts of black fur started to grow over my body. My jaw was starting to shrink, and my nose was getting longer. 8 people, 8 casualties, 8 unfortunates who would take the toll of my carelessness. I could only hope that 8 would be enough to satisfy its bloodlust, that it wouldn't try to break out of the car and prowl the streets. It shouldn't have happened. I'm sorry. One thing flashed through my mind before the beast took over. Damn, I really should have passed that driver's test. The Vampire of New Orleans. It was not a surprise or rarity for a port city in the latter colonial years to be rough around the edges, a place you wouldn't want to take the missus on a Sunday stroll, so to speak. And the port city of New Orleans was no exception. The landscape could be rough for a Southern gentleman to linger into, from pirates and cutthroats to salty old seamen, grizzled seafarers and laborers in the midst of their duties don't always take kindly to the softer crowd invading their territory, don't you know? The port of New Orleans wasn't particularly violent heading into the autumn of 1802, but that all seemed to change with the arrival of the widow's weep. a vessel that came from the province of Aquitaine, off the shores of France. She was mostly a cargo ship, but on this particular voyage she was carrying a large collection of a young count's personal belongings. His name was Count Louis Valois, whose family is one of the oldest in all of France, a descendant of kings. His family's manor in Aquitaine was one of the oldest and finest in all the lands, but the Count wanted a change and decided to travel to America. On board the Widow's Weep contained all of his personal belongings, some very large containers, as well as multiple crates. The Count's name was also on the ship's manifest, as well suggesting he was also on board. However, on the evening of November 19th, the Widow's Weep appeared on the horizon without warning. Its lanterns, dimly lit, was the only sign you could tell it was approaching. The harbor master and his men tried to signal for the ship to stop, but their efforts were useless. The ship just kept barreling towards the docks. As the ship neared closer and closer, the men on the dock scattered, and just as they did, the ship crashed where they had just been standing. The ship rested up against the destroyed dock and just bobbed up and down in the water, eerie and lifeless. The harbor master shouted for the captain on the Widow's Weep, or for any of the crew to make their presence known, but there was no answer. The ship was dark and quiet. Only the soft glow from a few lanterns illuminated parts of the upper deck. After a few moments, waiting for a response or some sign of life from the ship's crew, the harbor master took a few men and boarded the eerie ship. It was black, with only brief glows of light, lighting their way as the lantern swayed back and forth from the wind that had just picked up. And what they were able to see in the lantern light chilled them to their very soul. Thick pools of blood greeted them on top deck. They moved further up deck towards the helm, and gazed upon two severed arms still gripping the helm tightly. But the body that belonged to those severed arms was nowhere to be found. They continued to search the ship, and each grisly scene they happened upon was more gruesome than the next. The entire crew was torn from limb to limb. They finally made their way to the captain's quarters, where they found him dead, lying in his bed, still pretty much intact, but he had 2 puncture wounds in his throat and a huge gash in his chest, with his heart being removed. They thought the puncture wounds to be a strange twist added to all this carnage. A few of the other bodies they happened across that weren't completely ripped apart had the same 2 puncture wounds to the neck. But what did they mean? The boarding party collected 2 books from the captain's quarters, the captain's log and the ship's manifest, and continued on. The harbor master read from the captain's log to see if there were any clues to what had happened here. He came to a passage from November 10th, about a week ago. The captain reported some of the crew were complaining of strange noises coming from the cargo hold. Not long after that crew began to disappear. Then on the 12th, the first body was found. The first mate Wilkins, who was savagely torn apart. Then, one after another, more death, more savagery. Someone, or something, was killing the men on the Widow's Weep. But who? The last journal entry was from 2 days ago. The captain said he and a deckhand named Charles had cornered whatever it was in the cargo hold and locked it in. After reading that the harbor master and his men checked the cargo hold but found nothing, no signs of carnage or disturbance, and nothing was missing from the manifest. All personal items belonging to Count Valois was still on board. Speaking of the Count, it said on the manifest that he was a passenger, but after checking the stateroom, there was no sign of the man, no sign of anyone even staying in the room, and his corpse was not found amongst the dead. What happened to the young Count? About an hour after the ship had crashed upon the docks, out of the commotion and chaos emerged a stately fellow, claiming to be the Count's lawyer, and produced a letter to the harbor master, written in the Count's hand and stamped with his official seal, asking for his effects to be delivered to his two properties, the mansion in the French Quarter and his mansion in the bayou. The harbor master agreed and sent the Count's belongings on their way. The Count himself was not seen officially until a week after the crash at a dinner party held by Marie Latreille, who was pretty much the who's who in New Orleans high society at the time. Little did people know, though, is the first disappearance happened that night, the beginning of a stream of many. A maid at the party, named Julie Leclerc, was the first. She was never found. Then maids from all around the city, from the finest households, started to disappear, and people started to notice there were always two constants. The parties were at night, and the Count was always in attendance. People had their suspicions now, but that's all they were, suspicions. He was a count. He was descended from royalty. It would not be polite or proper to question such a gentleman in high society. Then bodies started to be found across the city, with having two puncture holes to the neck, dead and drained blood, with the bodies always being found near the vicinity of the Count's properties. People started to be quite alarmed and angered over the deaths of their loved ones. Many who were last seen near are going into one of the Count's mansions. So the sheriff and an angry mob tracked the Count down to his mansion in the bayou, or so they thought. The mansion was empty. The Count was not home, but they did find the remains of some of the missing, savagely torn apart and drained of blood. They burnt his mansion in the bayou down to its foundation, then searched his mansion in the French Quarter, but once again they found nothing. He just simply disappeared, leaving death and carnage in his wake. People were shocked at first, not understanding how a young gentleman such as the Count could perform such savagery. We now know that answer. We now have a name for what he is. For he is a vampire, the death that stalks the night. The people thought the Count had been gone for good, but not long after people started to disappear again, and their bodies found with two puncture holes to the neck, completely drained of blood. It's continued throughout the years. No matter the decade, no matter the century, it continues. He's still out there, feeding. So whatever you do, however safe you feel, don't walk the streets of New Orleans. at night. The Big Bad Wolf by Wept, 1985. Ever since I was a child, I have been terrified of werewolves and wolves as well, especially movies about them, and as a kid I was crazy enough to watch them, but I covered my eyes whenever I knew the scary wolf was going to appear. So this obviously gave me terrible nightmares for most of my life. It was a Friday, on Halloween night, my favorite holiday, 2016. At the time, I worked as an English teacher in a company I always thought did not appreciate me. On that night, I was planning to watch a horror movie marathon like I did every year. But I was thinking about watching a werewolf movie that year. But one of my coworkers recommended me an old movie called An American Werewolf in London. It sounded scary, but I really wanted to face my fears and give it a shot. On that day, I was very excited because I had already bought candy for the trick-or-treaters and some beer for me, but I wished I didn't have to work until 5 p.m. So, as soon as I got off work, I took my things and left my office. I drove my car home, which I called the Batmobile, to execute my plans. I listened to a song called Thriller, which I loved listening to on Halloween nights. I got home at 7 p.m. or so. Then I took a beer from my fridge, drank a long sip, and heard the doorbell ring, which scared me for a second. But then I heard, "Trick or treat," behind my door, so I opened it, complimented the kids' cool costumes, and gave them candy. The trick-or-treaters kept visiting me until 8 p.m., and all the while I listened to heavy metal and ate ramen for dinner. After that, I grabbed my laptop and watched my horror movie marathon, and I left the werewolf movie for last. I sometimes had to pause to get another beer, and it scared the crap out of me, but I still thought it was a great movie. So I was 6 beers in and decided to go to sleep at midnight. That night, I had a terrible nightmare where I had to run away from a werewolf in a dark, foggy, and creepy forest, which was only lit by a full moon. In my dream, I was screaming my lungs out, and I felt extremely disoriented and afraid of the huge, bulky, black as night werewolf that was chasing after me. I ran for my life for what seemed like hours, but I felt the beast closing in on me. I turned around several times, and all I could see was its dark silhouette, bright red eyes, and yellow teeth baring at me. I screamed again and ran a bit faster now. Out of the blue, I came across a huge fallen tree that blocked my way, so I had no choice but to jump over it. I heard the werewolf growling and panting behind me. So it jumped the tree too. While I was still mid-air, I felt a sharp pain on my back, and I woke up suddenly. Then I jumped out of my bed from fright, hit my body against the floor and cursed. I rubbed my eyes, got up slowly. Out of nowhere, I felt a sudden and strong pain on my back, just like in my dream. I tried reaching for the place where I felt the pain, but I could not reach it. So I went to the bathroom, washed my face, drank a bit of tap water, saw myself in the mirror, turned around, and to my horror, I saw 5 deep, bloody gashes on my back. I jumped forward and said, "What the hell is that?" The next day, I went to the hospital and got my wound patched up. I simply lied to the doctor and said my cat had scratched me while I was sleeping. I obviously did not own a cat. To this day, I still ask myself if that was just a crazy dream, or did my terrified mind somehow make it a reality? Who knows? The truth is, I never watched a werewolf movie again, since I was terrified that I would have another nightmare as vivid and terrifying as that one. The Werewolf That Lived on Mulberry Hills. Author deleted. The campfire devoured the logs of wood in the night sky as a group of 6 boys settled themselves around it. "Okay, guys, this is it," a boy said, known as Lloyd, the one thing campfires are infamous for. "Oh, good. I was waiting for this time. I'll have an entire pack to myself," a boy called Jack said stupidly. "Idiot. There's a difference between famous and infamous," snapped a boy named Peter. "He means to say we're off to sleep now." "Shut up, both of you morons," came Lloyd's reply. "I mean neither of them." He ignored the scandalized look Peter gave him and continued. "So, yeah, I'll be the one starting first, and the one I'm going to be saying is quite different from the others you hear, because this one is as real as you are all sitting here." Lloyd gave him a look of deep loathing and continued. "As I was saying, what I'll be telling you is perfectly real, even if it sounds as if it's not." When everyone continued to stare at him, he decided to continue with the story. There was a man who lived in a house on a hill called Mulberry Hills. He was a werewolf, and he lured children into his house and ate them. Once, he bit a boy he caught because he was causing a lot of trouble and locked him in the basement to eat for dinner. Of course, he too was a werewolf after he was bitten, and he killed the man. Legend has it that he stalks around and kills people every full moon. Peter yawned. While doing so, he missed the look Lloyd gave him. "Where's Fenner?" came Arthur's voice after a few minutes of silence. "Oh, he might have gone to excuse himself the trouble of listening to Lloyd's childish story," came Jack's reply. "Isn't your little werewolf going to come today?" "Huh, Lloyd?" he chided. "Oh, I don't know. He might," Lloyd said slowly. "Isn't Fenner's name something related to werewolves?" Arthur wondered. "Oh, wait." Jack looked horrified. "Yeah, Fenner was the name of a murderous wolf in Norse mythology. Fenner isn't here. And admit it, when have we ever seen him on a full moon?" Jack and the others looked horrified, except Lloyd, who just said, "Told you so." Fenner returned after a few minutes, to everyone's shocked and horrified looks. Confused, Fenner made his way towards Lloyd and sat beside him. "Oh, they believe you're a werewolf," said Lloyd, correctly interpreting his silence. "Aren't you scared?" he said menacingly, flashing a toothy grin that looked horrifying. "Oh, no, not at all," said Lloyd. "But aren't you?" Fenner was taken aback, figuring out what he meant, and he understood. So did everybody else. The clouds parted, revealing the full moon, and Lloyd, flashing an ethereal grin, looked up and howled, exploding into a ball of brown fur. Turned by the GraveShifter. Just recently, my vampire girlfriend and I were strolling through Esther Short Park, hand in hand. As we were telling each other about our day, I abruptly stopped, grabbed her by both hands, and exclaimed, "What about tonight? I mean, the full moon is at its strongest during its current cycle, right?" She looked into my eyes, and as her eyes began to brightly glow, replied, "You are persistent, aren't you? We've been together 6 months, and you ask at least once a week. Besides, you did relocate from the Southwest up here to the Pacific Northwest, just like me." I smiled, nodded my head, and remarked, "At least you haven't mentioned that no coming back thing." We both laughed as she took me by my arm, directed us to the nearest park bench, and sat me down. She positioned herself on my left and stated, "Gonna be a bumpy ride at first, but remember, I'm here, and I've got you, babe." As I close my eyes, I feel her right hand behind my neck and her left hand on my chest. I feel a warm, wet kiss on the left side of my neck, followed by a second one, and then I jolt as I feel 2 pierce marks enter my skin. She holds me down as she drinks. Memories flood back and forth between us, and then darkness. My time as a human is over. Brightness. My eyes open. She has me by the waist, and I realize we are not standing on solid ground. Did I say brightness? What an understatement. As I look to my left, and the freaking full moon is dead ahead. She cracks a huge smile and says, "And you thought being at the base of the Hollywood sign in 1987 was cool." Wait, how did you know? Oh, that's right. Silly me. By the way, she remarked, your hazel eyes are really glowing. Won't take too long before you will be able to control that, like brightness on a television set. Well, are you ready to continue our walk in the park? No, not just yet, I replied. After all, I'm enjoying both views. As we fully embraced in the light of the full moon, she whispered, "So, I really am the tattoo on your soul." I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.